Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the final event of our 6th season of Artwork. I'm Bonnie Marranca, member of the theater faculty and curator of this series. Every year, Artwork brings innovative artists to Lang College to speak about their work and the artistic process. Tonight, our guest is the dancer, choreographer, teacher, and dance writer, Douglas Dunn, one of contemporary dance's most versatile figures, and also accompanied by members of his own company, plus a reader. Douglas's own writings and thoughts on dance are collected in his recent new book, Dancer Out of Sight. After graduating with a degree in art history from Princeton, he eventually made his way to the dance world and was a member of Merce Cunningham's dance company, besides working with Yvonne Rainer's group and the Grand Union Collective of Dancers. By the late 1970s, Dunn had founded his own company, Douglas Dunn and Dancers. Since then, he has made a wildly eclectic range of dances, the most recent of them shown this winter at Dance Space Project, Causations. This work is highly theatrical, witty, emotional, and full of wonder, even beauty, a rare quality in today's performance world. The music of Mozart, Debussy, Maria Callas, flamenco, and Bulgarian chants filled the space, sometimes sharing it with the colorful sculptures of his frequent collaborator, Mimi Gross. She is only one of Dunn's frequent collaborators, who often include composers, writers, filmmakers, and designers who have led him to work with such artists as Robert Ashley, Dave Berman, Rudy Burkhart, and Anne Waldman. Dunn is a restless spirit, constantly moving in different directions, exploring new things, talking dancing. Once he created a dance from watching a 4-year-old girl outside his window. That kind of creativity reminds me of the quality of imagination in Edwin Denby's much-admired essay, Dancers, Buildings, and People in the Streets, which celebrated everyday movement all around him. Dunn himself has said, and here I'm quoting, "I am aware of noticing some things more than others, the gaits of individuals and animals, architecture's effect on ambience, the individuality of trees. Rhythm and texture are everywhere, grass blowing in the wind, a rock bouncing down a mountainside, a coil of cable on the floor backstage." I first saw Dunn's work in the mid-'70s, and he was featured early on in the publications I edit, in various interviews and articles. In a 1980 interview in our Live magazine, he had a rather glorious explanation for what he does. Here is what he said, and I'm quoting, "I remember thinking that living in New York meant that I had to dance. I didn't know if that meant that if I didn't live in New York, I wouldn't have to dance, but I knew that I couldn't live here without dancing." End quote. Over the decades, what a bounty of dance did Dunn bring to performance culture? There's the early performance exhibit, which was 4 hours of stillness for 6 days a week, over 7 weeks, and Stravinsky's Pulcinella, which he choreographed for the Paris Opera Ballet. And the Higgs Field, which was done in Central Park in the midst of people and small animals who happened to be in the same place at the same time. Another dance, Riddance, comprised 5 solos inspired by the 5-element theory of traditional Chinese music. Yet another dance was The Common Good, which was based on Dunn asking everyone he knew what they would like to see, and then proceeding to make a dance, make a dance based on their wishes. Back in 1978, after seeing him in his iconic Lazy Madge at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, the influential dance critic Arlene Croce described Dunn in her New Yorker column in these words, and here I'm quoting, "A tall, thin, straw-colored man with a slack, impalpable style. This slackness has a flyweight elegance." End quote. This dancer of dancers has found the best solution to life: keep moving. When asking himself why I dance, he always has an intelligent answer. Here are some of them. I dance to put intuition in conversation with thought. Or here's another one. I dance to achieve a vital, non-heroic presence. And yet another. I dance to have a say in what I submit to. Tonight is our turn to submit to Douglas Dunn and Dancers. I hope you will join me in welcoming everyone to Artwork.
There are 3 ways to compose. 1. Fill in the blanks of familiar forms with your own colors. 2. Break up familiar forms. See what happens. 3. Force or allow your urges to develop their own forms. Shoot, here's another. 4. Reconfigure something old but culturally relevant, tuning it to current zeitgeist. During the setting of a step, a way to diminish the importance of what he likes and what others might like or dislike is to conjure a procedure that forces an unforeseen outcome. He can't get away from himself, but he can try to dodge or outrun his vision-narrowing preferences. Sometimes a completed step or dance suggests, by associative similarity or difference, or by a strange anti-associative triggering, the direction of a next step or dance. Seeing a lake, one thinks of an ocean, then a mudflat, then a desert, then a spindle. If he recognizes a step's meaning and finds it too frightening, he can always discard the move or change it, or stay with it to get past the fright. His project is to allow the reality he's a part of to take him over completely, so that he's inseparable from, thereby expressive of, the impersonal aspect of his nature. Then to consider whether what's revealed is worth showing to others. In class today, I thought but didn't say to the dancers, this square-ass technique is difficult, yes. Dry, yes. But builds. Concentrating on essence of body logic for big moves in all directions, implicitly advocating expenditure of energy proportional to moves needs, builds, I say. Strength and spatial expansiveness, promotes increasing complication, curtails decoration. From it, loosen and run wild with confidence in sturdy underpinnings. Whereas, train relaxed and swingy, inner feelings always comfy, happy from beginning, limbs not willed beyond pedestrian range. Difficult from there to ever extend to visual clarity, body part to body part, whole body to space. Hard too, depth and strength of plie a must, not done in a day. To master equal, all body muscular stretch, alert, responsive, 360-degree listening and sensing, full bore, all pore environmental interacting.
Dancing, reading, rehearsed words, no breaks. Momentum plays singing part, prize signs apart. Upend thoughts stops, carry crazed weight on bony chassis. Link lines unlikely, elegant, ungainly. Focus force to nothing's ultimate, non-grand central, cells all equal. Fight through, air's dense fire burns, eye end ashes. Leg brooms sweep earth's cellophanes, sway gripeless sequence, shapes sea swell carousel. As way to tell, business guy, it's what you sell, unless you fall down. Here African chief gives orders lying on back. I started dancing to stand up straight. You can do that supine too. In order to be long, you have to extend. Finger involved. Better know whereof you speak in terms they understand if you don't want to be abandoned. Provoked response proves you're out there where you want to be. But there's out, there's soul, there's throat too cold to hold forth. No meaning binding without co-signing. Art's lost trust, its renegade lust. A safe deposit ego trip, or ride on Jason's fleeceless ship? Is that the choice? My father's quip, bread or inner band? Dancing, effortless receiving, Here come comets streaming, 3D etchings, imports, sylvan silk screens, dreaming, stretch, move, flesh, gleams, lightning, longer limbs, muscles, magic, fast through back, unflat trajectories, smack vivacious velocities, veer vectorlessly, hums, skim, skins, shimmer, north-south lasers, sideways signals, send Arctic, Caribbean, blue-green seas, palm tree, bull moose, reveries, teas.
There are two ways to compose. A, knowing what you want to be received, crafting the appropriate vehicle. B, following unclear but bubbling intuitions, letting textures emerge from seriously playful, thoughtless action. I guess a third way, C, would be somewhere between a combination of the two. I've always thought I was a B, but on days of less urgent choreographic intention, I know I'm involved on a less conscious level with A too, with what you think, what I suspect you'll respond to, how I can get you to give me, I mean my dance, your undivided attention. Apologia pro motu in vita sua. Modern dance has no place in American life. As colonists, we build forts, grab land, kill Indians. As pioneers, we trek, we plant, we grow families. We industrialize, we technologize. We have bombs to build, wars to wage, gadgets to invent to outwit our enemies. We have plastic to mold to give us cancer that we be challenged to conjure its cure. There is no time for frivolity. The aesthetic life requires sensitivity of feeling based on listening, seeing, touching. Sensitivity of feeling demands a slow pace and an open mind. Success in our American world demands suppressing these delicacies. Breakneck competition is the way to achievement and to prosperity. We work hard, then celebrate with spectacle. Melodramas, blockbusters, porno flicks, arousing easy emotions to orgasmic peak as reward for preternatural vitality. So a few forests fall, a few species disappear. Who needs trees? We have benches made from bottle caps. Who needs cheetahs? We have robots to clean our homes. Soon our organs and limbs will be synthetic, our brains computers. Soon we will live on Mars in artificial environments. Won't we be proud? And our programmed sentiments will infuse us with numbed acceptance. Modern dance is retrograde. It sees the complex body-mind as a temple to be dwelt in, lived from, revered. It says that any possible spiritual progress must emerge from an unembarrassed physical being. Thus, we dancers are unchristian. We are not afraid of the flesh. We are interested in its sexual potential and its urges toward pleasure and ecstasy, as well as in its capacity for discipline and rigor. We aim to integrate all human vital energies, transforming even the lowest and meanest into radiant beauty and meaning. How have we fallen so far off track? Modern dance is also elitist, and we know that elites are reprobate. Dedication to excellence makes for cliques and thus militates against homogenized democracy. We should be ashamed. But ashamed of what? That we constitute an insult to the psychic infrastructure of our society, even to our so-called culture, already thoroughly commodified? Or that we are so cowardly that we accept our marginal status and rest on localized laurels, dancers dancing for other dancers forever? Like scientists, we investigate, we hypothesize and test our guesses, but we don't produce results helpful in upgrading weaponry or increasing computer power. We are useless. Our dances are no more than provisional proposals of ideal or hazardous relational configurations. Reluctantly, we rely on Western expertise to make our lives manageable, though our practice requires nothing but human presence. We play like serious children as the machine age gyrates towards self-inflicted cataclysm. We try to resist being dragged into the vortex of responsibility as defined by property and money. Or we exceed and enter the fray in order to find space to move and the wherewithal to pay one another to dance, compromising our ideals in order to demonstrate them, polluting the millennial evolved stratosphere by flying here and there to show our steps. Modern dance isn't even a burr under the saddle of the Marlboro Man's imperious ride into an atomic sunset. Modern dance is mostly women and men in touch with the feminine. The over-muscled American male has beaten the American anima down to near silence, transforming our life-giving earth into a grave, and we are dancing on it. Undiscovered country. Even when one lives where one works, what a great number of things must go right to allow a day's dance rehearsal in New York City. The alarm must ring, the gas stove light. In winter, bulbs must illuminate and steam fill the radiators. The subways must run so that dancers may arrive. Terrorists must not have attacked. Hurricanes or other natural phenomena that produce fear and trembling and disrupt urban ebb and flow must not have occurred. None of this infrastructure is under personal control. These multifarious, fragile gifts of city life, though humanly made, are miraculous and not to be taken for granted. Then also, for the rehearsal, the body must yet be workable and the desire to dance present, or at least the will. As the choreographer moves through daily tasks required for living, she gets better at them. They no longer present an insurmountable challenge. Feeding herself in the cat, doing the laundry, cleaning the apartment, keeping friendships warm, going to professionals to maintain health, etc. These behaviors become manageable, part of a consistent, repeating rhythm of possible existence. Likewise, the work attendant to the profession, providing income, securing space, finding dancers, communicating with presenters and audience, these and other obligations, never easy, also finally find proper proportion and cease provoking excess anxiety. Such preoccupations fill the majority of the choreographer's time, attention, and energy. Yet they have nothing directly to do with her purpose. The pleasure and meaning of living emerge only when dancing work begins. Training by way of technique class, showing moves, encouraging dancers towards the shapes, rhythms, and tempos of a new dance. Now the choreographer is in her element. But even these activities do not constitute the crux of the choreographer's endeavor. Rather, it is the moment of choosing the next dance step that brings the world to a halt. Daring to dive into the unknown, determined to resurface, however altered, this is the daily adventure, the ever-renewing transubstantiation. By whatever means, waiting, trying, looking, remembering, imagining, it is this mortal slipping out of mind down into deep-sea caverns rife with anomalous forms and figments to bring some back, try them out, decide if they are meant for light of day, or better left below in the dark, that allows the heart to beat one more time. The quality of choreography is not strained if its origin is honest. Honesty depends on fealty between primal mind and action. Laziness and need for response constitute impediments to ingenuous intuition and output. Honesty and sincerity are not equivalents, the latter subject to infiltration by demonic compulsions to diminish or aggrandize the socialized self. Candor, a gift to oneself and others, emerges from attention worked via a medium's resources into form consistent with momentary awe. Even a repeat of another similar configuration becomes fresh when voraciously derived, though opting not to publish the obvious also counts as generous. The senses pick and choose according to willingness to allow reality to hurt. Sentimentality, fear, and anger turn what's true to false comfort. Reverence that subtends superficial response to difficulty and annoyance keeps imagination clean. Humility prepares a ground for fearless expression. The clown, knowing he's not, is able to be funny. The king, dining with the peasant, harmonizes the realm. The master, strictly correcting the disciple, enriches the lineage.
Song begin. Hello. This is Jinju Songbegin, member of the company. Oh, yeah, Alex Mintz on tech today. I guess we can leave the bug there. I guess okay. So would you show the this piece was made this phrase, duo phrase was made beginning at 5:45 today. Thank you. We might no, but if you want to put something warm on. Okay. So that ends the presentational aspect of the afternoon. If you would like to make comments or ask questions, I'm happy to respond, and you may ask things of the other participants as well. No questions? Okay, I'll see you. Well, I'll ask you a question. This is Grazia Della Terza, longtime member of Douglas Dunn and Dancers and close person in my life. Maybe you would like to make a comment or ask a question? Jennifer. She was in many of the photographs that you saw, the black and whites from the 80s, I suppose it was.
What was your first thought in approaching this event?
That I didn't want to do the familiar artist talks about his work thing. As the years have gone on, I've become uncomfortable with artists talking about their work, all kinds of artists, not just dancers. I don't know why, I can't explain it, but it's a format I don't favor. So I thought, well, what could I do? And Bonnie Marranca was very kind in allowing me to do what I think she named. I didn't know what to call it. She said, what are you doing? You're doing more than you need to. You don't have to do all this. I said, but I want to. She said, well, what are you doing, a performance demo? I thought, that's a good name. That's in the old days, we called these lecture dems, and we had dancing with commentary, but a few oh yeah, I know. At the time I launched my book in December, I did a little performance with it, and I wanted this visual idea, because in the book there's a passage that Nick was not reading from that is 13 or more line paragraphs that I wrote at request of somebody, Elena Alexander, for a particular journal, and it's quite rhythmic and It's all about sound and rhythm and much less about meaning. As I say, the meaning's kind of difficult. And you heard some of it with the fast edit. So my idea, because the text is very dense and almost unreadable and almost unhearable, there's no punctuation in any of these paragraphs, I decided that maybe I could have a visual accompaniment to it. So I asked Glenn Fogel to do a literal fast edit. And you saw that. You remember that? Okay, good. And it cost him, well, me too, but it cost him, I think he said, 3 hours for every minute, or every 30 seconds, some outrageous amount of time to do that. Because he has to find the material that goes with the text, and then he has to edit it. So I really liked it. It was exactly what I had in mind. And then I mixed it in with my first interests with video. I've never had any interest except remembering dancing for video, but I've become interested in close-ups of things with some movement that are quite abstract, or sometimes are not so abstract, but in many cases, more abstract the better to me. So you can't tell what it is. I mean, you can tell what most of those were: some water, some trees. Did you get the bark? I like it when you can't. It has to be either recognizable and so extreme that it has a different interest, or it has to be unrecognizable. That's sort of the basis of that idea. Forgotten what I was talking about. Oh yeah. So my original idea was negative. I didn't want to do the standard thing. So I've been wanting to develop this format for a while. 3-ring circus, reading, visual, and some choreography that's not fixed yet. So you get to watch the in-progress idea. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Good. Here we go.
Two things. First, I think in the video you said at some point what will make people want to watch only the dance. And of course you have so many things going on, it's very hard to watch only the dance. Secondly, in the video also you have words, a stream of consciousness, and visuals to go along with that. When you choreograph, do you feel like it's a stream of consciousness of words? Do you start with words, or is it stream of consciousness movement?
Can you remember the first question? I'll answer the second one first. They don't have to remind me. It's amazing you caught that line in the first. That out of all that text, she remembers that. You remember that one line, which is a line that I almost resisted writing because it tempts one into that territory of, what are you thinking? What are you doing? So the last question is easier, though. No, absolutely not. I never think of words when I'm working. And even when I arranged the order of the video material, I wasn't thinking at all words. And I anticipated a question like this. And I had a phrase come to mind one day while I was thinking about it. I was thinking that I'm interested in a narrative that's a formal narrative rather than a psychological narrative. Now, I know that's an obvious idea, but I never had it formulated in my mind like that before so clearly, that there is such a thing as a formal narrative. Or he's throwing that word narrative around a little loosely, perhaps, but a sequence of events that has formal basis rather than a psychological basis. That's helpful for me. It may not be for you, but it was very helpful for me. Now, the first question about, can you say that line again from the text? You said it almost word for word. Oh yeah, it's in a context of, there are 2 paragraphs that Nick read that begin, the first one is, there are 3 ways to choreograph, and the second one, there are 2 ways to choreograph, I think, right? And in the second one, it says, the first way is to, first one is to do what the audience wants, so to speak, and the second one is to do what you want and worry about the audience later, if at all. And then I go on, I say, I always thought I was an A, meaning the first meaning. But later I thought, well, maybe I also have some B concern there, that I am actually sort of unconsciously or in some other level of my mind or my whatever it is, dealing with what you might see and what you might feel, and how can and that part of me is operating on the level of. Then I make a little joke, a little bit of irony there, where it says, "So you can really pay attention to me." Oh, I mean my dance. That's the joke there in that line, right? Is that right?
I like that joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says, I've always thought I was a B, but on days of less urgent choreographic intention, I know I'm involved on a less conscious level with A too, with what you think, what I suspect you'll respond to, how I can get you to give me, I mean my dance, your undivided attention.
This attitude goes way back in my life, and it's certainly by no means unique. There's a whole lineage of this. Well, there's more than a dance lineage. There's an historical, century-long thing about it, or more, or who knows how long? Because who knows what people were thinking when they did things. But the crude distinction, let's call it, between making stuff in order to make you feel a certain thing or think a certain thing, on the one hand, and on the other hand, making stuff from whatever other interests the person making it has, and purposely or not avoiding that attitude of making something that will make you feel a certain thing or think a certain thing. You can call it making effects or not, making effects. Now, there's no such thing as performance without effects, but how they got to be what they are can matter, in the sense that if you take a kind of negative attitude, which I would do when I choreograph, if I make something that I see that I've done before, I change it. But usually I'm pretty clever about not even getting there, because I have without working at it, I have a memory of what I've done before. It's all in there. I've made 40 years of dance, but still, it's there. And I recognize, ooh, that's even too close to what I made before. So I'm just working to make something new for myself. And I'm not thinking about, oh, and it'll be new for you too, because I know most of you have never seen any of my work. So that's not an issue.
In this sort of impromptu performance demo you just did, before going into it, to me the notion of beginning the dance would be the most intimidating. Like, where do I start? What's going to be the first position, the first movement? But how do you decide when is appropriate for the dance to end? Do you set any restraints on yourself before going into a performance like this? Or is it entirely intuition-based when you want to end?
Well, today that's easy, because I stopped when the video stopped. I mean, that was just arbitrary. That's why I corrected myself when I said this dance I made. I didn't make a dance. I made a phrase, and I started about 5:30. I told Jules today that I was restraining myself from thinking about what I might make for the last several days. I had to work out a little bit. I didn't even allow images to come. But I did decide that I wasn't going to wait till 6 o'clock to start, because I had nothing else to do here. We were already set up. Everything was ready. So now I don't always start this way, but today I started by trying to find a move that I thought was interesting. And it's the first move. What was it? Oh, this thing, yeah. Ba. Show me, I can't remember. Ba, ya, ba, 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 ba. Yes, that move, okay? And so then I decided to have them do a moment of unison, and then I wanted to partner. And partly partnering comes quicker, to me at least, than solo dancing in terms of choreographic work time, because I don't know why. Maybe there aren't as many possibilities. Maybe that's part of the reason. But it took me 5 minutes to make that first little unison phrase, at least, maybe 10. And after that, I was able to work much faster when I was working them together. Am I answering your question? Oh, so ending. So that's beginning. So ending. Another part of my lineage, you might say, is the no beginning, no ending lineage. Instead of this kind of art, I say art that goes through time, like theater, music, dance. Instead of this idea, there's sort of this idea. This is, again, a very crude distinction, but I think it's valuable. This idea. You begin somewhere. It's not necessarily like Beethoven, where you know it's a beginning. And at the end, it's not like Beethoven, where you really know it's an ending. It just goes on and it stops. And so I just went on. I wasn't thinking about how much time I had to make something, and I wasn't trying to make it have a beginning, a development, an end. But again, I mean, all this is intuitive. I don't know. When I watched it the last time, when I sat down and watched it, I became aware that I put in 2 or 3 slow down times. This time when they bring the hand up slow, and then when they do this slow. I don't know. I like that. I liked it that the tempo, which was kind of a da-da-da-da tempo overall, had a moment of repose or slow down, a rest. Like in music, it's sort of like a rest. To go back to your question, I do think of it sort of, I mean, no words, but I do think of it like music in the sense that I'm always dealing with rhythm. Rhythm is a foreground datum. You know, it's not that I plan the rhythm, but when I get it, like when I showed Jules this phrase, she leaves Jinju. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, all these things are going on all the time. You have shape, rhythm, tempo. They're all there all the time in dance. You can't get rid of one or any of them. But what you pay attention to can influence how it comes out. Once I made a dance where I realized I'd never paid attention to tempo as a foreground material. And so I said, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to force myself to do that. And the first thing I made was something I'd never done before. When I took a phrase, I don't remember, but something like this. And then I kept doing it, and I started to slow it down. And I was shocked because I realized that the change of tempo was a drastic, and now here I go back to your first question, a drastic change of meaning. Not meaning like words again, but meaning like, whoa, that's such a different thing, isn't it? I mean, to me, that's really different. Because this one, I think, was actually more punchy. It was sort of a boxy thing. And by the time you slow it down, it's just a little different world. So I was shocked, and the whole piece became full of this not changing tempo in the sense of like here, where I said the 2 restful moments, but taking the same material and speeding up or slowing it down. It really affects how I feel about the phrase once I see it.
Thanks.
She kind of answered my question before, but so do you have like a daily practice that you do, and how long have you had that?
Let's see how briefly I can answer that. The answer is definitely yes, and for the last several decades, I've pretty much had the same routine, which is if I'm teaching, which I like to do, 3 days a week in the morning, I can still handle that, and I teach an hour-and-a-half technique class, and that becomes my warm-up too, because I do the class, and if I'm not teaching a day, I do a 45-minute to an hour thing it's pretty much the same. It's very dancey. I'm in the classical modern lineage, Merce Cunningham, which is the most classical of the various modern styles. So I do the straight leg thing, the pliés, and I do all that stuff. But there was a period, so I started studying ballet when I was in college, and I loved that, but I didn't want to be a prince, so I got away from that. And then fortuitously found Merce Cunningham because I was about to go back to teaching school, which is what I was doing. And the way he presented the body was what I needed to see at that moment in my life, and it completely changed my life. And then he invited me to his company. That was unexpected to me, and that made me really able to try to train this idea about the upright body that wasn't a prince, just an upright body. And then I left his company in '73, and after about 2 years of still doing all that, I had a real reaction. I didn't want to do the stylized warm-up anymore. For about 5 years, I did an improvised warm-up. I just followed the stretchy need of my body. And then I went back to this. Because this works to an extent, but I found I was losing some stuff. I was losing some jump. You know, I just wasn't doing the sequence of events that you need to do to maintain the strength, especially in the vertical range, and the quickness in the horizontal range. If you want an equal adventure in all the directions, you really have to do the plie. You just cannot get away from it. It's this essential move.
That reminds me of my other question, which was, do you have like I'm imagining that you have some kind of checklist almost of like certain things that you want to put into each piece that you make or each phrase, like levels or
No.
Is there anything like that?
No, I don't think like that. And when I do teach at New York University a bit, and all the students there have studied, help me,
Ballet?
No, that, the German. But then Laban Bartiniev, yeah. So they have all this language around, give me some words, well, who knows? Space hold, levels. He categorized all these different kinds of moves. I think it's cool, but it's just not my thing. I don't want to get my brain going like that when I'm working. But I'm not saying I don't. But see, again, it goes back to what I said about effects. Okay, I'll admit to one thing. I like variety. And that's not necessarily part of my lineage. I'm associated with all the Judson people, even though I wasn't there at the time. I was there with them later in Grand Union. And they gave up a lot of what I still liked, meaning jumping, verticality, elegance, all those things, from the ballet and through Merce. I lost track. Wait.
There is something you always have because you always hire dancers who have seriously trained their bodies.
Definitely. I hire dancers. My favorite idea about a dancer would be someone, if she or he's walking down the street, you wouldn't necessarily know he or she's a dancer. But in the studio, he or she can do anything you ask, meaning jump, turn, go to the floor, get up fast, daring and virtuosic and elegant. It's hard to define, but elegance in dance, I guess you have to just comes out of the ballet. That's what we mean by elegance in dance. And even though my body was not proper for ballet, it was almost, but not really. Too long the torso in relation to the legs, that kind of stuff. Not enough, as I say, princeliness. It is the standard, and I since I always loved that, I ended up being funny, which I didn't intend ever, I promise. But because I thought I was being elegant sometimes, and I wasn't, people saw the discrepancy that I didn't know about, and they thought it was funny. And it turned out that that was good. It was good. It added a dimension to my work that I never planned. I'm sorry, I'm losing some thread here with your question, though. Can you repeat? You're talking about daily practice. We covered that, right? What? You said you were going to admit to something. Variety. Yes, that's it. Thank you. So not all, like many of the people who came, they're a little bit older than I am. They're like, 5 to 10 years older than I am, but I'm sort of mixed in with them. Many of them got very involved with pedestrian movement, huge amounts of repetition, which is, again, more of this idea, flat line. Oh, that's so funny. That's hilarious, isn't it? The flatline dance. No. DOA. No. Various strategies, as some people would like to use that word. That's again not my language, but of getting away from the heroic aspect of dance. That's what the objection was on the part of many of these people. Dance was too heroic. Even Merce, who mitigated meaning and got rid of music and all that stuff, so there was no big climax, he still, for many people, was just too heroic because he actually wanted to jump, you know? I always thought it was interesting how he dealt with that, you know, that he made the biggest things as plain as he could, you know, and he made this Zen thing was not just a rhetorical come on, it was actually true for him that a so-called, in other forms, preparation like bah leap, no, this was no less interesting to him as a real thing than the leap, or at least so he said. But I mean, in his work, it's true. The stuff that's down that later goes up is what it is. It's not. You can look at the ballet. You know, you see some guy, he's about to do a double tour, and he's in 5th position, and he plies. And just before he takes off, he goes. You can't see that, but you know, it's very hard to jump from 5th position and turn in the air twice, even though it's a standard male ballet thing. So you see these guys. I'll exaggerate. You know, they give up the fifth position because it's easier if you get a little cheat there to start. So that's an example of something that Merce never did double tours, but still an example of that kind of thing, where you don't cheat on the downs in order to go up more. You just don't. And you don't buck. Bucking is like this. It's a leap. Instead of just holding your torso up. You get a bigger jump if you do that. It's like basketball. The torso is helping you. If you go, it's a lot harder, but it's more elegant. And you're able to see what it is, and it has no purpose like basketball.
Thank you.
Uselessness, that's a good subject.
You mentioned that you prefer choreographing 2 dancers instead of just one, but how do you feel as a dancer? Do you prefer dancing solo or?
I prefer working with 2 dancers rather than one, you say?
Yeah.
I didn't say I prefer, I said it was easier, or it takes me less time to make something, to make a duo, than to make a solo phrase. That's what I meant by that. Yeah. Do I prefer dancing by myself to dancing with dancers? I like it. Oh, I like all of it. You know, I mean, I'm almost embarrassed to say I still love dancing. I think I should maybe stop. But well, you heard that one text. I don't know if you could take all that in, but the one text talks about. I put it in the 3rd person female to throw you off, but but that person who feeds the cat and takes care of all the business and waits to get in the studio for that moment of making the next step. Yeah, that's me. You know, I just was trying to. In the book is so full of my name and I this, I that I took some of the pieces and I turned them in terms of person and gender. And my son, I have a son, and my son I sent him that text before the book came out, and he always is nice to me. He loves my work, blah blah blah, but he wrote and he was upset. I don't know if you remember it well enough, but I say that nothing's as important as this moment in the studio, you know. And I mentioned all these different things. He wrote back and said, "Douglas, what about your family? You don't feel that about your family's not important to you." I really felt his pain. I thought, oh my God, I went too far. So I had to write him and say, "Look, I'm just making a point here. I still love you, you know." It was kind of fun, but he really felt something because I exaggerated the point. But I don't completely exaggerate. Is he here? You know, I mean, when I think of the things I've done in my life, to have a place to go and make steps, it's unbelievable, you know. And I've done those things in order to do that. And it's monster amount of bullshit you go through to have that opportunity to make steps with your body. I mean, what could be more out of the mainstream? Does that answer your question? That's the last thing in the book, and I wrote it just a couple of months ago. I mean, well, book launched in December, probably, you know, middle of last year. Yeah, those last two pieces in the book, the harsh one about modern dance having no place in American culture, I wrote that in one night, and I was really angry and upset. And actually, I wrote it for Wendy Perrin at Dance Magazine. She asked me to write something, and I thought, oh, I don't have time to do this. I told her I don't have time. And then that night, I said, I want to write this thing. And I wrote it, and I was shocked by it, and so was she. She didn't print it. She said, you know, some people in Dance Magazine, they're young girls, and they might want to work with you someday. Do you want to really put this in the magazine? I said, I love that. Yeah. I said, yeah, I do. She said, no, I don't know. I've showed it to my friends. They think it's like the Unabomber text, she said. But then, just a few days later, I had two ideas for her, and that was the first. A few days later, when she rejected it, I said, well, maybe I'll work on this other idea too. And that one also came quite quick, and it was I guess like night and day, those two texts. But the last one is, even though it made my son a little uncomfortable, there's a kind of honesty about it that's not typical of my writing. I love irony, and I love what words can do when they're so oblique, you don't know who's talking and all that kind of stuff. And the book is full of that kind of stuff, especially the early writing. There's nothing, they don't tell you anything about me. I hid myself entirely, which is a great pleasure for me. Are we getting there? Yes.
Oh, thank you. My question is about the writing and how I really appreciated being able to watch the wheels turning as you made this phrase, and also the wheels of the dancers turning as they were figuring out what it would be, and then listening to the text and not being able to see your wheels turning as you are making that, and wondering what that process is like. And then when you said that you don't have any words in your head when you're making the steps, so I guess I'm just wondering what is the relation? How do they relate to each other, and what sort of state of mind and do you use for each of them, and how do they relate?
I find them completely different activities, radically different in every sense, not least of which is because when I write I have to sit down, and I'm a restless fellow. But almost, I would say 3/4 of the things in the book resulted from people asking me to write something. And the early pieces are very opaque, and they're very brief, and they have to do with feelings about the scene, but responded to in a way that has nothing to do with my obvious personal reaction. So the invitation to write is very important to me. That gives me a motivation that I don't write often at all, and I need that, or I want that, and that's been hugely helpful. And then it's just an adventure. And the other thing that is obvious contrast is that when I make dancing, especially if I'm making dancing not to music, which I do half the time or whatever, I hardly ever edit, or very little, or in the moment. Whereas when I write, I find, 10 times at least before it looks right. And it feels I feel much more vulnerable writing than I do dancing. Hugely vulnerable, like, am I going to admit that? Or all these feelings come up that don't come up around dancing. And I like this, but it's very, very scary to me. And so I do work, especially the pieces in the later pieces in the book, where I actually am trying to respond to people's questions, directly, which I at first didn't always answer. There are two pieces in the book that were generated by Connie Creamer, who had these two books about 10 years apart, I guess, of asking choreographers questions. The first time she asked me was 1980-ish, and I just didn't want to answer her questions. And in the book is this facetious dialogue with myself. Douglas says this, and then Douglas says that, D. And I just avoided it completely. It's like a ironic interview. And then 10 years later she comes back and says, we're doing the book again. Would you like to do something new? And by that time, more people had asked me to explain myself, and I tried to resist. But this time I felt, okay, What would happen if I actually tried to answer now? So the thing, instead of 3 or 4 pages, is about 10 pages. And I spilled the beans, you know. I tried to say everything I could as fully as I could. It even came out, embarrassingly for me, a little didactic at times, a little preachy. Like by that time I really know how I felt about certain things in dance that I hadn't paid it. Before they were in me, but I didn't care. I just worked from them. Now they were more conscious, and I was able to say, I go on at length about this business about the center of the body and how if you keep your body centered in that classical way, that you can still jump and move quickly to the side. And if you don't do that, ... you know. So if people who don't do that, they might be offended by what I said. And I realized that for the first time I was saying something that could turn somebody off.
And what about editing? Because you said that when and how do you edit? Because I've heard you say everything came out at once in certain pieces and then...
In the dancing or the writing or both?
In the writing, and both.
Well, again, in the dancing I don't edit that much, but I'll tell you how I functionally do it. I tape everything. So at the end of a rehearsal day, I tape what I've made, and then I sit down and look at it, and I say, okay, we can change this. So that when the dancers come back, I don't have to watch it again in hem and haw. I can say, you know, when you're doing this, I want you to do this. And so that's very efficient use of the time with the dancers. But usually there's not that much. Usually I figured it out pretty. As I said before, when I work with music, it's a different story. When I work with music, again, generalization, but I tend to be kind of literal with the music, to the point of irony sometimes, because I have a hard time with music and dance as a combo. You know, when the dance is tied to the music, sometimes I think that's difficult. So when I do that, I tie it so tight that it becomes ironic, maybe. But not because of the, I don't set out to be ironic, that's just my way of relating to music often. So then when I work to the music, I have to work so long to get it right. So I use the video over and over, back and forth, that by the time a dancer gets there, I know exactly what it is. There's never any editing left, okay? The writing, I don't know. I write it, and then I look at it. And unlike the dancing, where I might come back every day to it if I have a rehearsal schedule of that sort, the writing, I find it's good to let it sit and come back to it. I come back a week later and say, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. You know, and I really want to change it. And I want to change it on many levels, like the levels of dance, rhythm, vocabulary, meaning, everything. The meaning becomes so much more a dominant feature in the writing than it does in the dance. I don't pay that much attention to the meaning of the dance, the meaning in that sense that, you know, if I asked you, which would be interesting, if what you saw in that duet, how would you describe that duet in terms of its meaning, its tone, its flavor even? Not its literary meaning, but in terms of, you know, how would you describe that phrase today? I don't worry about that. The only time I worry sometimes, in Stucco Moon, 1980, late 80s, I had two female women, two females, and I made this duet on them one day, and at the end of the day I said, and I watched, I said, oh, I can't use that, it's way too beautiful. And I really meant it. It was so pretty, because they were so pretty. But somebody said, Nick, come on, Douglas, leave it. It was in an hour and a half piece, so nobody was going to really be upset by its being that beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you. You're really wonderfully attuned and attentive. Thank you.
My question is about environmental interacting. You mentioned that in your reading, and we saw one of you dancing along to a Mozart score, and there's another video of you with the taxi cabs in the background, and then there's a living room too. So I'm wondering how important the environment is to the dances that you choreograph. Does the environment play a role in that?
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, well, when I first was working, I did a piece at the theater at Westbeth. It's on the ground floor. It was 1974. It It's one of the first things I did, first evening length thing I ever did. It was a big moment in my life because I realized if I could do this, then I could go on as a choreographer, and if I couldn't, I wouldn't. It was sort of a threshold moment in my life. And when I went into the space, it was a black box space, but I asked them to move the bleachers away from the walls. I set up the space in such a way to make it as, in my mind, as artificial as possible. So even though it was already artificial, I wanted it more artificial. And I had a corner, a white corner that I built, which stayed away from the real corner. So I was interested in this idea of making an implicit statement, not explicit, but sort of implicit in terms of arranging the space to point out how fabricated performance is. It was sort of the first time I had that thought. And it runs through the text a bit. I come back to this idea a few times. It's been somewhat a conscious idea because I have a real problem with the idea of sincerity on stage. You know, what is that? There's no such, it's not possible really. Because you're a character as soon as you're standing there or dancing there. But environmental, that word, I know I threw that word in there. I knew that was a tricky word. It's amazing what you people pick up on. Because it suggests, you know, environmental, as in environmental, ecological care of the planet, which I'm all for. But you're limiting it, thank you, to where I'm dancing. So I think the best answer is that I've made quite a number of dances for specific places, both outdoor and indoor. And when I do, I don't, well, the dance is somewhat generated by these situations. And I'll give you one example if you have time still. In 1980 or so, this also is described twice in the book, actually, this piece. It's called Disappearances. And I got together, I was having a workshop, and people were coming and going, and they were all very unhappy. They were all very unhappy dancers, and the more we worked, because I was working in a way that had to do unusually with not just form, but a little, I was sort of getting to know them a little bit, which I don't usually want to do. And they started telling me how unhappy they were. And then I realized I was unhappy too. And the reason we were unhappy was because dance was going down, and economy was coming up, right? Reagan, money. You weren't alive yet, I know, but there was a huge change. The 70s were like this gritty, downtown, fun artist thing. And then Reagan got elected and everything started to shift over to, instead of talking about art, people were talking about money, even downtown. And instead of people saying, Douglas, we'd love to have you make a new piece. Go make something and bring it and we'll show it. By the mid-80s, they were saying, Douglas, we'd like to invite you to do something, but we'd like to see a video of it first. How am I going to how am I going to do that? I'm going to spend the money to make the piece, then I'm going to watch the video and say we don't want you. It was a complete reversal of who was in charge. Instead of the artists sort of, you know, having their prerogative, all the presenters and the funders took it over. And a lot of them shifted to social work, if I may use that term. They didn't want some art dancing. They wanted some dance that they could take into impoverished neighborhoods and change people's lives, okay? I'm not against that, but it's not my thing. Because of what I already talked about. I'm not making effects, so how can I make something that would be right for that? So the disappearances. So disappearances, so I developed this piece around this despair. And we made some moves in the studio like this. Lots of little things that were sort of in between standing around and doing something. And then we went down to Wall Street, where if you know the space right across from the Occupy Wall Street Park, there's a plaza there, a bank plaza with a big orange cube sitting on its point. That was space number 1 for us. We did the half an hour there at lunch hour. Then we walked just a block back to the Chase building where there's a beautiful platform, raised piazza there, right in front of their building with a nice Dubuffet sculpture, also another sculpture, and we did another half hour there. So our task, there were usually about 10 of us, and our task was to do this stuff, like maybe 5 people, you know, doing the same thing, until we thought somebody noticed that we might be performing, and then we'd just dissolve, as if we weren't doing anything. And the instructions were if somebody came to ask us what we were doing, we said, oh, no, we're just on our lunch hour, and we like to sort of, you know, exercise a little bit. but along the Broadway there are a lot, at lunch hour, there are all these, those vendors with their silver carts, and they were there every day, and we did this for 2 weeks. So then sometimes somebody would go get a drink from one of the vendors, and they would say, "We know what you're doing." And the Village Voice sent a photographer down, and she went home and said, "There's nothing happening." And but then she came back the last day, and by that time I was warned that she'd been there, and so I said, "It's our last day. We'll do whatever we'll pose for you even," because she couldn't find the dance, and also the guards in the Chase building, they were also hip to it because we were there every day, because the last day. Also last day, I went up on the parapet, which is this raised part of the platform, which has a pretty long drop down there. I don't know, I was feeling frisky, and I was, pretending not to dance up there, and the guy came running out, whoa, and he said, "You have to come down, you have to come down, you can't be up there." I said, "Oh, okay," and then he said, "But it's a good show." So these two sets of people knew, because they saw it every day. Not that it was the same every day, it was never the same, although, some of the movement would repeat, but very on the edge, on the. So that's one example of a situation where there was a space influencing us, but that piece had an idea. I'm afraid to say that piece actually had an idea behind it. There have been other pieces. Bonnie in her introduction mentioned the Higgs Field, which is a dance I did in the Pine Tomb, I like to call it. Some people say Pinetum, which is a place in Central Park about halfway up in the 80s, I think, on the west side. And I made it as an outdoor dance, and I made it spatially various, so it didn't have to fit exactly in a particular space in a particular way. And we did it on weekends, I think 4 weekends, a couple of times each day. I don't remember quite a bit. And we got pushed around a lot by the guards. If you don't know that Central Park has about 4 different police forces working there, and as soon as you do something, I tried to get a permit actually, but they said, "Oh, you don't need a permit, no music, no permit, you don't." But as soon as we started dancing, they were on us. We had quite a few adventures, including I was on the ground doing some squirrel movement, and this guy came up to me. He was about the 3rd person who had come up to me, and he said, "You should really get up now. I need to talk to you." And I didn't. I just, one idea is to ignore. So I just stayed there doing my movement. And he said, "No, he said 4 or 5 times, you really should get up. This is getting more serious." I said, I didn't say anything. Finally, he said, "The next step is going to be the police are going to come." I still didn't move. I thought that'd be cool. A little publicity, finally, finally some publicity. No, and so he said, and there'll be a fine. I said, "How much?" He said, $200 a person. I stood right up. Because we were dancing in this place where they have these special pine trees and a fence around. Now the fence doesn't say you can't go in, it just says no dogs allowed. So the fence was only about this high. So then they moved us outside the fence, and we did all the remaining shows outside the fence. It was still okay, but it wasn't as much beautiful as it was in this contained area. The idea you have a sort of a set up stage in the round with this beautiful little fence and the nice grass and the pine trees. But so that was a piece for the park, outdoor, but didn't have to be in that particular space, as the police pointed out to us.
So this is a couple separate thoughts, but you said that there's a huge difference in your approach to creating dance and creating writing. One is very conscious and edited, and one is sort of a little bit more free-flowing. But you also said that you're very influenced by your environment. What was it like having your environment be your conscious, edited thoughts? Do you follow me? Today.
Oh, well, you saw me laughing. If you happen to look over here, sometimes I was laughing because, yes, the environment was very specific today and had a lot going on. So, I didn't listen all the time, but I was aware that Nick was reading. I know those words by heart. So when I hear them, I'm not straining to know what they are. I know what they are. And I know this video stuff pretty well, some of it very well. And then we have a specific space here. In fact, the gentleman who's running the video for us, he came and marked the spot. He said, I was going to try to be over here, but the dance kept going over here a little bit. And he came and said, he put the tape and I said, try to be here. And I said, yeah, I'm trying. So there were a couple of times when we got over here that I specifically made the choice spatially to have the dancer go back because of this space. I didn't let it fill the entire space. And I must say the strangest moment was when you see the video of the Mozart, which is very brief, it's only a couple of minutes, but you know, whatever rhythmic stuff is coming out of me to make this thing was somewhat distracted by hearing that music. It's so blah, 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 but you know, it's bouncy and it carries you along. It's very hard to tune it out. Some of the other stuff was easier to tune out. So all these things, and I actually felt the music influenced me a little bit. I don't remember exactly what phrase I was making then, but was it this thing? Yes, right there. Good for you. She's sharp. Yeah, that turn went right with the music, and I don't know if it came with because of the music or not, but I noticed also that it was right on the music. And of course the music went away. Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that helps one, well, is that all right to say? No, maybe not. One of the things that happens is that limits get set. And then, unless you can't stand it and you really want to buck the limits, you work within them and they tell you what to do to some extent. Well, this is not quite a good. It's not quite a good example. But maybe it's an example. If I'm making something for the stage, I'm not involved with this kind of frontal presentational need for dance. I have no problem people being seen from all angles. But I recently made an evening-length piece that Bonnie mentioned, Cassations, which I made intentionally in the round, and it opened a lot of possibilities that would never have come up using a front, where audience is going to be on one front. Because the audience was in one, you know, chairs all around, one row of chairs all around. And it was so much fun. It was so exciting to let this thing open like that. I felt much freer about certain choices than I would have if I'd been trying to face a certain way, present a certain way. So that's a clue, I guess, that unconsciously, you know, I'm not aware of that until I go to make the piece in the round, but unconsciously one is feeling the front, even though you think you're free to turn whatever. Some part of you is addressing that, or some part of me is addressing that idea that now they see this. Well, I made choices in the piece like that. Today, the phrase. Yeah, I did. In fact, I thought, oh, isn't that interesting to put Jules, who's a little bit shorter than Jinju, in back? You know? And I had Jules in the first half. She's initiating the partnering more than Jinju is, and then Jinju does more later. So that was something of interest to me today, because I've never made a duet on these two people. Is that true? That's true, right? Yeah, so I've never worked on them before, which was both intimidating, but also liberating, because it's fresh. Oh, you know, I'm not conditioned by anything that I've made on them before. So it's kind of a new territory, undiscovered country. Are we done? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
For all of you here, we have refreshments and drinks, and feel free to hang out and talk and chat.